Tennessee Volunteer edge rusher Byron Young. If your team drafts him, what should you expect? The pros, the cons, projection? We'll discuss it next on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find me on Twitter at DP_NFL. I'm a national scout over with the Draft Network and your favorite and local running back guru. And, of course, to talk championship rings and things, I got my boy, Mr. LSU himself, as always, Keith Sanchez. You can find him on Twitter at TheTalentCode. Keith, talk to him, baby.
Yes, sir. Locked On family, what's going on? This is Keith Sanchez, senior draft analyst at the Draft Network. And like my guy DP cues up every single time, man, 2019 national champ. Yes, those LSU Tigers. But, man, the key reason why we're here, DP, the reasons that we're here, DP, is to talk championship level content, man. When it comes to the NFL draft, man, to have these in-depth conversations with you, our people, the Locked On family, our listeners, man. And today we have quite a slate, man. We have Coach K's key thoughts. Like we said, slow it down and we could get it right, man. We have stock up, stock down, me and myself, DP, we've been going through these edge rushers, man, and we have some conversations that we want to have. But we want to start this thing off, man, with one key guy that we watched separately, and then we had a conversation, and DP said, man, this Byron Young, and I said, you know what, I'm about to finish the statement for you. He has one of the most explosive first steps in his entire class. And he said, yes, sir. So, DP, man, we're going to have a prospect spotlight just on Tennessee's Byron Young, because this is a guy that we don't think that people are really talking about and giving him his credit for what he has done in his college career, but the type of prospect that he could be in the NFL.
Man, Keith, you said it. Explosive. That's the first thing I wrote down, Keith. And I'll say it like this. Tennessee edge rusher Byron Young is one of the most underrated prospects in the 2023 NFL draft class, Keith. When you think about the rocked up frame, we've seen him up close and personal twice, in Mobile at the Senior Bowl and in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine, right? And he tore the building up when he was at the Combine. One of the guys that really kind of set the tone himself. He was a little overshadowed by Nolan Smith running sub 4.4, but if it wasn't for Nolan Smith, he would have been one of the biggest winners from that event, Keith. And you look at the explosive first step off the ball. But not only that, Keith, I feel like his hands are a little underrated as well in terms of being able to quickly disengage from blocks and quickly dislodge the hands of opposing offensive linemen to be able to rush the inside and really threaten. You talk about a fastball pitcher, a fastball pitch off the edge. That's Byron Young, man, a 3-4 outside linebacker, Keith. When you watch him, tell me and the family what some things that stood out to you.
Yeah, I think it was the explosive first step. And this is why the explosive first step is important. It's because you're quickly putting the offensive tackle in a panic mode, meaning that they have to come up out of their base, right? And the offensive tackles that don't have those quick pass sets where they can get a lot of depth, right? Byron Young can just beat them around the outside. And they're so afraid of that because that's just like an easy path to the quarterback. That what they do is they lose their fundamentals. And what that does is this, and that's why I say it dictates pace, because the minute they come out of their base, you set them up for opportunity for a counter move, right? So now you can break back inside. So if you think about all the great pass rushers, I mean, in the NFL right now, right, like look at the high-level athletes. You're talking about both of the Bosa brothers. You're talking about, what people classified Chase Young to be. You're talking about Khalil Mack, right? Like, Max Crosby. Like, all of these guys have good first steps off of the football. They're good athletes, and then they're able to create counter moves based off the fact that offensive tackles know that they have good first steps. And here's another key part, DP. You talked about it, his hands, man. Why does that matter? Because offensive tackles, they want to be able to get hands on you before you get hands on them, right? And they shoot these hands. That's why you always hear offensive tackles talking about, hey, he has 34-inch arms, 35-inch arms, things like that, right? But if you can knock those hands down and you play with a good base like Byron Young does, man, you have a path to the quarterback. So I just watched him. And I said, there's so much potential here. Then the other part that I thought about DP was this, man. This guy plays hand in the ground right now. I'm like, this guy, he is not a hand in the ground. Well, he can play it, but his best position to me is a 3-4 outside linebacker, meaning that he's standing up on the edge, right? He's outside of that tackle. He doesn't have as much run responsibility as a player, and he can get around the edges and just be a guy whose main mission is to get after the quarterback using his athleticism. So I was impressed. I gave the guy a first round grade. I put my grades in yesterday for the edge rushers. I gave him a first round grade. I think he has, if we're talking about potential, he has as much potential as those unproven edge rushers that, you know, some of them that's in the first round.
Nah, Keith, I love it. That's bold, but you laid it out well. And I want to talk about his character a little bit, Keith. You talk about a guy and you really look into his background. You know, this young man was out of football for like over a year, about 18 months, almost 20 months, man. You know, he was a assistant manager working at a Dollar General before he went to work out or try out for Georgia Military College.
Yeah, I actually talked to him during that time, even when he was in JUCO, man, because obviously I was at LSU and everything. I actually talked on the phone with him, man. He was at talking about a grade A character kid, right? And he was working at a grocery store and just so thankful for the opportunity to play football. And he was a guy that he blew up during COVID, so people didn't have much contact with him, right? Like we couldn't get him on campus because visits were restricted. Like we couldn't, do much with him. All it was phone calls and FaceTimes, and you kind of had to make a decision off of that. And it was one of those things. It was like, man, this is almost too good to be true, right? Like this guy's a grade A character kid, explosive first step. Like I may have the film that he sent me, because all he could send me was workouts on his phone from Georgia Military College. Which looked like it's in some backyard somewhere. The jerseys are like halfway torn off. It was just like it just reminded me of like The Longest Yard, right? It looked like The Longest Yard when they first got their jerseys, man. But extremely impressive kid. The film checks out for me. I don't know, DP, like how high are you on him? Like what is your projection that when you're talking about the ceiling? Like what do you think he can reach?
Man, I think he could be one of those like legitimate go get it type of sack guy. Some guys are schemed up sack production. This is one of those guys that has the physical traits, Keith, and the work ethic to be a go getter, right? Like we think about basketball. Man, it's fourth quarter, late in the shot clock. I need a bucket. Who's gonna get me a bucket? And that you got certain guys on certain teams that they can go get you that bucket. I feel like he's that guy said, man, I need somebody that can go get me that sack on 3rd and 12 in the fourth quarter and help close the game out. I think he's a closing type of pitcher where you put him on the field and you rush him off the edge. And he's one of those guys that you stress that outside shoulder so much that he starts working back inside with his agility, his hips, and his strength. He can work back inside and get to the quarterback. I think he could be an 8 to 12 sack guy a season, Keith. I see that type of ceiling for this young man. So watching this game, man, I came away really impressed with him. And like I said, for a young man and listening to him and even seeing him down at the combine at Mobile Senior Bowl, one thing that stood out to me, Keith, was he stayed after practice with Auburn edge rusher Derek Hall, two guys who have very similar builds and games, right? And they're just working on hand counters together, right? Just working together to get better. And you love to see things like that because that self-awareness of, man, I know that I'm a fastball off the edge. I got lower center of gravity. I can kind of get under guys' hands and push through. But if I start working on these quicker hand counters, I get my hand placement even better. I start throwing different moves at them, and I have not just a first move, but the second move and the third move. It's going to make me even more difficult to block. So I think this is a young man. I give him a high 2, high second round grade, Keith. But he's a little older. He's 24. But Keith, at the same time, if you're in the back end of the first round, you think about the Kansas City Chiefs, right? You lose Frank Clark. You got George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis is more of a power rusher. A guy that's more build up to collapse the pocket. Yeah, defensive end. And you throw that fastball on the opposite side of him, Keith, and now you getting after Herbert, Jimmy Garoppolo, who we know is not a mobile quarterback, right? And Russell Wilson, who we saw was a shell of himself last season. So, like, teams in the back end of the first round, I think if you – I'm going to tell you a name that pops up to my mind a little bit, Keith. I think a little bit about Azeez Ojulari coming out of Georgia, but I think he's more juiced.
Yeah, I thought of Azeez, and then I thought about the good years of Yannick Ngakoue right? When he had those double-digit sacks. But I think both of those are really good comps for him. And I mean, we'll kind of continue to throw out comps, as we think about this. But you're talking about a guy that, and you don't even see a designated pass rusher, but he's a guy that you tap in and be like, go get the quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like all right, come on, it's go time. It's 3rd and 8. This your time. You know what to do, man. And I think he has that type of first step explosion, man. So that wraps up our prospect spotlight, man, for Tennessee's Byron Young. If you haven't watched him, go check him out. Whether it's a quick highlight or something, just go check him out so that way you're aware of who he is come draft night, because I believe that if NFL teams see what we see, this is a name that could be one of those surprise picks that comes off the board that nobody's seen, but it makes all the sense in the world. Like you said, if there wasn't for Nolan Smith, this guy would have took the cake. This guy that ran a 4.40 at 250 pounds, man. So he had one of the most impressive combines at the NFL draft. But DP, man, look, we like controversy, baby. We like controversy. So we're coming up next, man. We have our stock up. But we have to do the stock down also. Tell you what prospects that maybe everybody else is high on that we're not as high on, and then tell you what prospects that everybody may not like that we may be a little bit higher on. So coming up next, man, we have our stock up and stock down segment.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Guys, you've heard me talk about this mobile gaming app before, and if you've ever thought you make a good GM, you got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as it looks to create a dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling your dynasty, controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all of the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, injuries, player personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic gaming world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free, playable offline, play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On NFL Draft listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Stock up, stock down. Keith, the stock market is always open, baby. It's always open, Keith. Now, let's start with the good news. Whose stock is up for you right now?
Okay, I didn't know which way you were going to go with that. I didn't know if we were starting positive, negative, which way we was going, but I'm
well, good news always first. Good news always
first. All right, cool. Good news always first, man. I am going to Ole Miss, and I'm going with Ole Miss defensive end Tavarius Robinson. I hope I got that right. Tavius Robinson, man. This is a guy that's listed at 6'6", 260 pounds. That had the sack production. I believe he had 7 sacks this past year, if I believe correctly. Was a Senior Bowl invitee. And when you watch him, man, you see a long linear frame. I think he's a guy that at Ole Miss was out of position, meaning that Ole Miss, they ran one of those kind of like Big 12 defenses, right? Like the 3-3-5 or the 3-2-6. They did a lot of those different things to where he was reduced inside of the offensive tackle. I think that this is a 4-3 defensive end. So I think of teams like Minnesota, right? Like they run that 4-3 scheme. He's another pass rusher that can come off of the edge. And I think there's upside there because he has the length, he has the athleticism. You see a real bendy guy. Like he's not stiff, right? Like he's not so strong that he's stiff and he can't move. He's just a fluid athlete. And this is a guy that you talk about this draft class, right? Just imagine if we had these guys at LSU. Was another guy during that COVID period. He's from Canada, played high school ball in Canada, got recruited right out of Canada to come in. Then obviously Ole Miss had him. He's developed at Ole Miss the past 2 years. And man, when I cut it back on, I'm like, man, there's a lot of growth and development here, but I really like the prospects. So I think I gave him a 3rd round grade. Somebody that I believe can really contribute to a football team.
Man, Keith, I liked him too. I watched him last night, and, they stand him up. They rush him inside. I see him with his hand in the dirt, man. But one thing that stood out to me, Keith, as well, was this young man plays with a really hot motor, Keith. If that first move does not work, he's still fighting and working through to get to the corner. And then also, I felt like out of a lot of these edge rushers there, a lot of these guys are typically one-directional rushers right now. All of them don't have the inside and outside move. But I saw flashes of him, working outside. By that second, maybe halfway to that 3rd step, he cuts back cross face and gets to the inside angle and beats the tackles.
That's so important as a pass rusher. So important.
No, 100%, Key, because like you talked about with Byron Young, when you can when you can put that fear in guys when they got to get out in their vertical set to protect the edge and protect their outside arc so much, they leave the inside susceptible. You got to be able to work back into that. And I think Tavius Robinson does a good job of that, Keith. I came away impressed with him. I gave him a 3rd-round grade as well, Keith. I really like what I saw from this young man. And, man, for me, talk about stock up. Keith, I know that he's not going to be, for everybody. But App State's edge rusher, Nick Hampton, like 6'4", I think he's like 235. Man, long, good arm length. It's got nice quickness off the ball. But I feel like he has one of the better pass rush plans and repertoires in this draft class, man. He also somebody knows how to work back inside, work around. Good job knocking and dislodging hands, right? And swiping, other hands when outside tackles shoot their punches. And he does a good job clearing their hands to get around the edge. And then he has the hip fluidity, Keith, to also bend the corner and turn and flip rotation on the hips to close on the quarterback, man. And I came away really impressed with him as a pass rusher. Now, he's under 235 pounds. So, the setting the edge in the run game may not be his greatest trait, right, in terms of his forte. But I think about last year's, I think he was a 3rd-round pick, Keith, Myjai Sanders. They went to the Arizona Cardinals, and I feel like Nick Hampton may have a little bit more burst because he's used to playing on the edge.
It's not a bad comp because I think they were both linear guys, right? They wasn't as dense. And then, just like you said, they can kind of get around the edges, need to work on a couple of things, kind of underdeveloped, but also the productivity was there. Guys that you can send on, quick like slants and stuff like that, like, design things to quickly get them in gaps and allow them to get penetration. So I like that comp a lot, of Myjai Sanders comp.
Nah, I'm glad you do, man, because like I said, this was the first thing that I wrote down, brother. Like, I was like, Myjai Sanders, but then it was so crazy because they were used 2 different ways. Myjai Sanders for it, because Cincinnati runs at 3.35, he would play more 5-tech in the 4-point stance, and he was like 240 pounds. Where you see Nick Hampton, he plays some overhang. He's athletic enough to drop back in coverage, but he's going to be his best going forward. And you think about if you need you're talking about those wide 9 sets that you see in the NFL from time to time. You need that wide 9 edge rusher, that wide angle rusher. That's what Nick Hampton can be. And if he's just a DPR for you early on until you can see if he can bulk up and handle some extra weight and keep his athleticism, Keith, I think if he can do that, then he finds himself a more full-time role in an NFL offense, Keith. But now let's go to what stock I'm not really trying to invest in at this point in time of the NFL draft. And Keith, I want to kick it off with, and I wish it wasn't like this, Ohio State's Zach Harrison, Keith. Okay. I stock down for me, man. 6'5", 274. Keith, 36.25" on the arm.
All right, so
benched
I need to know something. And we're talking relative, right? Because stock down, what was the price? So what was the round that you were expecting? And then now where are you at with it? I think that's important, right? We say stock down, but it's important.
Context.
Context. Add context to it.
Man, I felt like he was going to be a late. He could have been a late second, 3rd-round pick. Truthfully, Keith, because he had I think he was like a 4 or 5 star recruit. He has everything you want physically for a base defensive end, Keith, with a guy that you could probably more than likely reduce inside. 36.25. He plays, he's an athletic guy for his size too. Strong. All of the physical tools are there. But man, he never truly broke out, Keith, his whole time at Ohio State. He was the only consistent part of his game was it being inconsistent. And that was so frustrating. It's like, you just look at it bro, just put it together. Get it all on tape for a year so you could show us what that ceiling looks like, Keith. And I never felt like that's what I got from his film. Over the summer, I liked him. And don't get me wrong, I still like him, but I feel like just watching him throughout the season, there was just too many peaks and valleys. He would kind of disappear at times. And it's like, man, you physically should be a dominant player, Keith.
Yeah, I wondered if it was paralysis by analysis. Was this a guy that was thinking too much? Because the flash that when he put it all together, right, those plays, you said, man, that's pretty good, right? That's what
that Maryland game against Jalen Duncan.
Yeah, he had a hell of a game. But then it was too many of the other things where it was like, man, come on, I wish we would just get it together all the way. And I, because when you watch it, you try to take all accounts, right? Like, okay, is he playing the right position? Is this the right alignment for him? Things like that. And I think he's playing the right position, right? He's
Yep.
6'5", 260, 270 pounds. He's playing hand on the ground, 4-3 defensive end, right? So it's the right position. It's just that the ability to put everything together was inconsistent, man. And I don't know why, you know what I'm saying? And obviously the NFL teams, they have those team meetings.
Technically, he's not clean. Technically, I could tell you that for sure. He doesn't have a lot like technical moves in his bag. A lot of just like power and burst and long arms and stuff. But just like having the counters and the ability to quickly win, it's not a lot there, Keith.
Yeah, there's a lot of elongated movements, and I think that was part of the problem. Like, I think he's a good athlete. I think he's smooth. We just don't know if he's quick twitch enough, like a quick reactionary athlete.
Right.
And that's necessary to win, man, especially when you're going against NFL offensive tackles. DP, listen, man, I got to talk about my guy. This may shock some people, man.
All right.
I am going with Georgia's edge rusher, Nolan Smith. I'm going with Nolan Smith, man. I'm stocked down. I'm DP. I tried. Listen, and the combine made me forget the film. I'm not going to lie. The combine made me forget the film. Watching him run that 4.3, 4.4, the personality, the attitude. I loved all of it. It checked all the boxes, man. But when we're talking about a top 15, top 20 pick, we talked about context. I'm going to add context. When we're talking about drafting this guy inside the top 20, I didn't see film that said that, man. I'm going to be completely honest, and I'll be honest on this whole podcast, that if he wasn't at Georgia and I didn't know he ran a 4.3, I'm not sure if people would be talking about him even in the second round. I think there's so much that needs to be developed in this guy. He played half of the year last year, right? But when you're talking about, just it was really combining things in his mind, right? Like, okay, cool, quick first step. Now hands, right? Now feet, like, you know what I'm saying? A feet, then hands, and then, being able to get to the quarterback, having a plan, right? And then once that plan is shut off, okay, what is my counter move? And then, what does my spin move look like? It looks like there's so much more that needs to be pulled out of there that it scared me. I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, even in a run, like, there was some things to where, him taking on blocks, like, especially like if we're talking about pulling guards and pulling tackles. So you're talking about power, right? It looked like sometimes it was his first time seeing it, right? Like, he would take it on, like, I would say incorrectly, but I don't know what Georgia coaches him to do, but that didn't look like proper things that how I was taught to do it, right? And so it just scared me. And I think there is, DP, I think there's some stiffness with him that limits some of the ability to bend around the edges all the time, and then to really just be a reactionary athlete. I can't remember what game. I don't know if it was Missouri I watched, but it was like he was in the backfield, and then like the quarterback was scrambling out to his right, and then he gave the quarterback the quarterback gave him just like a little hesitation move. And when you're talking about being a 4.3 athlete, like that stuff shouldn't throw you off, right? It shouldn't throw you off kilter, but for him, it did. And it didn't, like, the quarterback was able to get free. So it's just, man, that's a tough evaluation, man. It's one of those, you could get caught up, and if I'm wrong, people gonna tell me I'm wrong, and how could you ever have missed on this?
No, I mean, everything you said is true, though, Keith. Like, he's a projection style edge rusher. All the physical tools, the power, the run defense is legitimately there. The arm length, the physicality he plays with. But he's so raw in terms of his pass rush ability and skill set. Like, he has the physical tools to do so, but he doesn't have the actual knowledge of how to use the tools yet, right? Like, and I think I think you laid that out perfectly, man. I have no issue with what you said, because at the end of the day, he's very raw. And like you said, if he wasn't at Georgia, and if he didn't if he didn't go to the combine, this would be a day 2, like 3rd, 4th round type of guy that people look at like, man, he's more of a developmental prospect. But I absolutely see your point.
Yeah, and real quick, because I'm about to transition to the next segment so we can get out of here. But, man, I'm looking at it. 2019, he had 2.5 sacks. 2020, he had 2.5 sacks. 2021, he had 3.5 sacks. 2022, he had 3 sacks. He was injured. So, I mean, even if you project it, right, you're talking about maybe 5, 6 sacks. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so there's something that's missing there that with the athlete, it doesn't necessarily translate to the sack production. But DP, man, we talk stock up, stock down, and next up is Coach K's key thoughts, and it has to do with the edge rushers in this class.
All right, Coach K, what's that key thought for us, brother?
Man, the key thought is that I think that the NFL community or the draft community, we looking in all the wrong places for the edge rushers. And I think they're going, like, when we look back on this class in let's say 5 years, they're actually going to be more productive edge rushers in the second round and early third round than they are in the first round. I think that's where, when you're talking about the sack production, it's going to come from there. And that may seem like a okay, like, type of situation, but man, I throw out Felix and Duke Zoma, right? We talked about Byron Young being a sack production guy, and then I think about guys that go in the first round, like possibly Nolan Smith, right? There's talks of him, Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness. I'm seeing Iowa State's Will McDonald. These are guys that I have concerns about them getting after the quarterback. And so when I think of the guys like a BJ Ojolari going in the second round, I think the true value of the edge rusher classes of people that's going to get after the quarterback is the second round and early third round. So I would not be surprised in 5 years from now, there's actually more sack production from the guys drafted from pick 32 to 66 or something like that versus 1 through 32.
You know what, Keith? That is a key thought that I am on board with, bro. Like you laid that out perfectly. A lot of the first round talent are unproven in terms of their actual sack skill set, their skill set to get to the pass rusher, being technically refined. And I know we scout players for what they could be and not what they are. But that's that second day two, those second and third round rushers and the guys that you named, Keith.
Not to cut you off,
that's the potential.
Auburn's Derek Hall, right? Second round guy. USC's Tupi Tobolotu, another second, third round guy. So that's definitely where all of the sack production is for me. Well, or the proven sack production. I'll say that the sack production is more proven with those guys. We've seen it more consistent when we watch the film, man. But yeah, that's Coach K's key thoughts for this week, man. We talked edge rushers. If you need an edge rusher, man, I hope that we've outlined the guys that your team should be going after for this upcoming draft.
No, 100%, Keith. And like I said, that was a great thought, and I'm with you, man. Day two, even maybe, fourth round, you think of Nick Hampton, Iku Leota. You got two other, you got some other guys in this class that you can bring in. And to finish your thought, what was different about the second day two guys, a lot of those guys already have defined positions. Lucas Van Ness does not have a defined position. Tyree Wilson does not have a defined position. Nolan Smith, a lot of these guys they're projection based. So guys, listen, as always, man, like we know we have a good time, and edge rusher was the topic for the day. So as always, we appreciate y'all for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen every day, Monday through Friday. Guys, let's go subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Get the latest episode as soon as it's available. Guys, as for tomorrow, tap back in with us. You know what I'm saying? We got some big board stuff that we're gonna get into and coach them up, right? We're gonna get tap into that and have some more prospect discussion. For Keith Sanchez, you can find him on Twitter at The Talent Code. I'm Damian Parson, DP_NFL. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team